efforts announced today in hopes of curbing retail thefts in New York City.
Businesses will be able to share real-time camera feeds directly with the NYPD. The hope is to deter thieves, but when a crime does happen, it will also make it...
So shoplifting here is now so bad, the city's gonna roll out a mass surveillance network to catch thieves. But critics say it won't work if someone does something simple, like wearing a mask. Plus, New York doesn't exactly have laws that jail shoplifters, which means that businesses here really have no choice but to surrender to the thieves as crime keeps going straight up.
When it comes to shoplifting, there is no denying New York City is seeing record high numbers.
The stealing is too much for us to deal with.
The manager of the women's clothing store says robberies happen too often to count.
Almost every day.
It's just one in a recent string of crimes targeting small businesses in Hell's Kitchen.
Imagine if somebody was to be here, one of us, we would have been in danger.
The mayor says that the city began experimenting with this crime-deterring camera program about a year ago, and now he says it's ready to expand to 10 precincts citywide.
It gives the NYPD access to as much or as little live or recorded video as stores want to share so that police can identify thieves quickly.
It launches more efficient investigations, builds stronger cases, and leads to more effective prosecutions.
Data from the NYPD shows there were more than 63,000 retail thefts reported, up 97% from 2020.
So, real-time surveillance is coming to a store near you. But what nobody's talking about is that the city leaders have already stated the goal of this program is not to lock up non-violent offenders, which means peaceful shoplifting's reign of terror will continue, raising the cost of basic items as stores jack up their prices to cover their losses, clearing out our once prosperous neighborhoods as businesses price out their customers and are forced to shut down. Plus, it's come to light that last year, 500 people were arrested 7,600 times, and they were responsible for 30% of all the retail theft in this city, which means there are criminals who've been in handcuffs, who've been in the back of a police car. We know who these people are. Yet stopping them isn't something the police are allowed to do. And all these folks are still out there plotting their next move because in New York City, we don't actually lock people up when they commit a crime. They get released. Because in this city, we've decided it's easier to lock up our toothpaste than it is to lock up our criminals. This way, we don't risk tainting someone's future by putting them in the back of a police car and possibly leading to a negative outcome or a further life of crime, God forbid. But you know something? That attitude's led to a real problem that New Yorkers may be stuck with forever, because the only consequences in this city are felt by the law-abiding, who now have the privilege of living one step closer to a police state that watches their every move. Because since our laws and our justice system sees those who commit crime as victims of something else, it makes sense that controversial new programs like this spying network that might catch thieves on camera doing something they never get caught for exist and are likely never going away. So here we are at Burlington, which is a magnet for shoplifters. They've really had to step up their security recently. But even though there's a bike cable locking up every single bag in the store, businesses like this could soon enroll in the city's new surveillance sharing program, which is going to record all of us, whether we like it or not, all because we won't punish crime at the source by locking up the criminals who do the actual stealing.
You've seen items locked up when you go shopping in an effort to deter shoplifting, but the city says this new program may be more effective. It gives the NYPD access to as much or as little live or recorded video as stores want to share so that police can identify thieves quickly. The more quickly they're spotted, the more...
So there you have it. First it was the locked up products, like this watch right here. But now we're all gonna be recorded so the police can watch us debate which underwear is right for us. But although there are some minor benefits to this program, critics say long-term it isn't gonna do anything to stop determined thieves. In fact, it may actually tie up police resources and take police off the streets and have them watching cameras in a back room somewhere, instead of dealing with other problems like out-of-control subway crime or the recent wave of protests that has been sweeping over every area of the city. But before we get into why this program might not work at all, it's important to understand that city leaders are really excited about it, and that the company behind the video surveillance systems the NYPD is going to start using uses AI, which may help detect bad behavior, but also brings us one step closer to the eventual police state this city will become.
Mushtari Hardware here on 125th Street has had that link from its cameras directly to the NYPD for the last couple of weeks now, and in that time it's stopped locking up some of the items most popular with shoplifters. Knowing that the NYPD can see and identify anyone with sticky fingers quickly.
Okay, so this one section of the news report ends with a security guard and the news person filming someone as they rob the store and try to escape. And once you realize how brazen shoplifting is in New York City, that's got some people wondering if these cameras are actually going to do anything. Now, there is one store in the video that claims that the pilot program is helping them, and I believe that that's true now, while it's limited. Right now, you've only got a small number of stores that are even involved in this. And the question many people have is, once it's expanded, who's going to be around to stop the bad guys? Because look, you can expand the program all you want, you can add stores, you can add more cameras to stop people from stealing things, but you're not adding more police, which means we may end up in a situation where the police are totally overwhelmed by the number of surveillance feeds coming into their precincts. And that's got critics saying the program will only become less effective as it gets rolled out to more and more places, because the same small number of police are just going to have to do more and more work, likely hampering their response times as more and more crimes get recorded and sent to them. So is this program working now while just a handful of stores are in it? Yeah, I believe that it is, but once everybody's in it and we've got the same number of cops, we're going to have the same situation we had before the program rolled out, but the cameras, they ain't going away, because everyone knows that's not how cameras and surveillance works. Once you set these systems up, they're here forever. On top of that, recent New York City history gives us an example of how well this is probably going to work out. But before we prove that this system's going to work about as well as the city's other camera networks, it's important to look at who the real winners behind this program are actually going to end up being.
Along 125th Street, businesses big and small are now invited to enroll in the pilot program that the city pays for, connecting a box that looks like a router made by the company Fusus by Axon that gives detectives at the local precinct real-time access to.
All right, so this gets a lot worse the more you unpack it. We've got the city paying for the rollout of all the infrastructure needed to get these cameras in front of the police, which effectively makes this something we're all paying for, even though it may not help all of us. On top of that, all the security infrastructure that's going to be set up here is made by a private company that makes AI-enabled tech systems that defeat crime. Now, I'm not saying the company itself that makes these products is evil, but they do stand to get a lot of money from this, which makes them one of the winners from this system. Plus, the city now gets to watch us pick out t-shirts when we're at Burlington, so they're one of the winners, of course. Not because the city's evil or its current leaders are evil, but just because that whenever a society loses some of its freedom, it is now less resistant to its government if that government ever were to try and become tyrannical. This has people saying that down the line, if we elect the wrong people, things like this could be something the city regrets. Plus, the city also has another massive, expansive camera network in operation, which is less effective than advertised. In fact, back in 2022, there was a frightening attack that took place in the New York City subway during morning rush hour. Almost 30 people were injured. And despite the city's massive number of cameras in the subway, the culprit was still able to escape, and he wasn't caught until 36 hours later after he turned himself in. On top of that, the city has cameras everywhere, not just in the subway, they're above ground as well, and crime is surging at levels we've never seen before. Which means this new store surveillance program could end up being a joke as well, because we've already got plenty of cameras, and we've also got plenty of crime for some reason.
Number one, we can show the impact of this on not just the business owners, but the whole neighborhood, but also too as a deterrent, because now you have evidence that this is not a crime of need, this is a crime of opportunity.
Along 125th.
So she gets it. We're not watching Aladdin steal things from the store to feed Apu. And all of this is the result of out-of-control retail theft. That's why this Burlington is like a TSA checkpoint with the cameras and the guards and the metal detectors. In fact, every time we see a report about shoplifting on the news, it's never a family with young kids trying to feed themselves. It's always some guy with a big black trash bag and a mask for some reason. Which means that either every store who has a security camera feels the need to lie about what's really going on inside the store, or they're telling the truth. But there's actually another touted benefit of this surveillance program that our leaders are excited about, which may not end up working either. And it's kind of the one thing that the justice system was hoping might turn the tide against these crooks.
It launches more
efficient investigations, build stronger cases, and lead to more effective prosecutions.
According to the latest NYPD stats, more than 21,000 retail theft incidents were reported so far in 2024. That's a 5% increase.
So shoplifting up 5% over last year. Everyone acknowledges this is a problem. The mayor acknowledges that this is a problem, but this is where the program falls apart because video evidence, what good is it if that evidence isn't going to be put to any use? For example, shoplifting in New York is a misdemeanor as long as the amount is under $1,000. Misdemeanors don't wind people up in the backs of police cars. And if someone steals something from vans, what exactly is that video evidence going to be for? How harsh is the justice system going to punish people when the laws say that what they're doing is not really that big of a deal? Violent shoplifting, on the other hand, that's a whole nother problem because now there's a new law where if you attack a retail worker, that becomes a felony, which means video evidence in a case like that could be useful to prosecutors. But it also means the police can't do anything about peaceful shoplifting. And many of the people they end up arresting just get released so they can go back to doing what they were doing. But that's not the only problem forcing shoplifting to grow to an out-of-control problem in this city, because not only is the entire justice system in New York designed to not punish the people who commit crimes, it actually protects them. Because a lot of the times, even when someone does do something wrong, the charges end up getting dropped by the prosecutors who are supposed to protect the law-abiding. And sadly, what this means is that you could roll out the world's best surveillance system. You could have all the evidence possible, but when that evidence is presented to the district attorneys who are supposed to go after those criminals and bring charges, if they downgrade the charges or drop the charges altogether, what did it ever matter? Yet now we're all being recorded until the end of time. Now, in the district attorney's defense, there is a lot of crime in New York City for sure, and apparently oftentimes charges are downgraded to free up the court's time and resources for other offenses. But critics say so many charges get downgraded, we don't actually have any criminals in this city. And that has people expressing the opinion that this program is purely political, which means it's designed to sound like it's going to do something great, but in reality it won't do a whole lot, and it gives you something that you can show to voters that says you deserve another term. And that the city's epidemic of empty storefronts are beyond your control, which to an extent they are. New York's laws that decriminalize theft were written under prior governors and mayors, not our current leaders. Which means our leaders may in fact be doing the best they can based on how the chairs on the Titanic have been arranged.
Now, the mayor says the same 500 or so people were arrested 7,600 times last year, and that accounted for about 30% of the shoplifting in the city. He says the goal is not to incarcerate these nonviolent offenders, but to get them to stop doing it.
This is probably the most maddening thing I've ever heard in my life. Because on what planet is it acceptable for 7,600 crimes to be committed by the same revolving cast of just 500 people? Think about what this means. We don't need cameras. We've already got fingerprints. We've got mugshots. We've had these people in custody. And they all go in one door and right back out the other every time they get apprehended, allowing them to continue destroying the city in ways we've never experienced before. And here we have actual data showing that 30% of all retail crime in the city is committed by people we already know about. Yet the goal is to get them to stop being criminals by doing exactly what we were doing that allowed them to be criminals who do this all the time in the first place. Except now we're going to throw cameras into the mix so we can record all the crime that happens and still not do anything about it. Yet there's another problem with this program that makes the whole thing sound and look even worse.
The burglary took place at 4:30 in the morning when no one was around, but it comes a week after another smash and grab that was even more brazen.
Could very well be connected because they're completely covered in terms of face masks. They're all wearing gloves. They're being very careful about this, so it's clear these.
So here we have two recent thefts at jewelry stores, and you know what? The criminals, they were smart. They covered their faces. They wore gloves. They had masks. And you know what? The police have zero leads, even though the whole thing was caught on camera. How is that not going to be the result of this new New York City surveillance program? Police are assuming the same crooks robbed both stores because they did it the same way. But if we're going to say a robber that robs a store and covers up their face is an identifying characteristic of a crime, we got some serious problems, don't we? That's the reality of the types of organized crime that are shutting down retail businesses everywhere. On top of that, criminals cover up when they go into a store that they want to start stealing from, which means police and security personnel have very little time to react when a crime starts occurring because most of the time the criminal's already in there. But you see now, because of this new surveillance program, we're all being recorded anyways, and a system that treats nobody as if they're a criminal has to actually treat us all as if we are all potential criminals, which means something very frightening for the future of New York City. So the problem with this new system is that it's a step in a direction nobody wants to go, but since it doesn't go far enough, it's only going to lead us closer to a system that actually does go further. Some observers suggest that if enough stores close down, businesses and people that live in a certain area, they're going to demand something that is a lot more heavy-handed, possibly even offering up more of their personal liberty in order to make it all happen. Because if we're creating a society where all we can do is follow criminals around with a network of cameras that spots them before they commit a crime, there are some people who say we're going to end up with a sort of social credit-like system that monitors all of us, matches our face, our behavior, our body language, our gait to some sort of database and records whenever we go anywhere. But the NYPD is not actually allowed to use facial recognition, which for now makes the idea of setting up some sort of anti-crime, pre-crime system just a fairy tale for psychopaths who we haven't yet had a chance to vote against. But the more logical short-term outcome of all of this is more stores doing what Burlington's doing with a TSA-style checkpoint that has scanners and people and security guards at the front door of every single business you want to enter. Taking your picture, making sure you're not going to go in and steal something. Also, that particular store has the benefit of being in a building with elevators, which is tough to access. You can't just take something, run out the front door, and then be out on the streets. It's not possible. Another option could be more stores going the Costco route and having some sort of membership program where you have to have a card or an ID to even get into the store. You could have groups of stores setting something up like that. Maybe Dwayne Reed's, CVS, Walgreens. If you want to access any pharmacy, you've got to be some sort of member. Or you could do what Barnes & Noble does, sell a product that is too complicated for the thieves to operate. But you know, the real problem with all of this is that it's not free to set up. Those security guards, those cameras, all of those people, they get rolled into the cost of the actual product. So the things that we buy now end up costing more than they used to, just so we can still buy them so that they don't get stolen right off the shelves in front of us. And the craziest thing about this right now is you've got people in New York City living in overpriced apartments that they can barely afford to live in, where next year when the rent goes up, they're probably gonna have to leave the city. Every day these same folks, they go to a grocery store, they go to try to buy something, and it costs way more, and they don't even realize it because many of us, we don't want to make the connection between all of this crime and the fact that our own lives are tougher to live. Because in New York, we have so many people that are very passionate about fighting for fair housing, affordable housing, and for fighting for the rights of those who can barely afford to survive here. They feel like the government's not doing enough, but at the exact same time, we don't hear the same cries of passion to put an end to the shoplifting epidemic, which makes it more expensive for every single person to visit a grocery store. If more people do that, would it help citizens and politicians get behind the idea of actual penalties for stealing? And is stealing a tax on society that the law-abiding subsidize by paying higher prices? Let me know. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.